The day after the release of the female hostages and the start of the ceasefire period finds Hamas celebrating their victory over Israel. Apparently, they regard the fact that they avoided being completely wiped out as a victory, but the truth is visible for all to see. Meanwhile, the IDF has withdrawn from some positions inside the Gaza Strip in accordance with the ceasefire agreement, and large numbers of Gazan residents have tried to return to their homes in these areas, but all they find is ruins. Meanwhile, the operation to bring back the hostages is on its way, and for the next 42 days, the IDF will deploy in a new configuration in the Gaza Strip. The IDF is preparing to respond to any sudden event with an emphasis on curbing a possible wave of violence following the release of hundreds of terrorists. Elsewhere, the Arab world is struggling to digest an idea mentioned by a member of the incoming Trump administration to transfer Gazan residents to Indonesia. In the northern arena, the 60th day of the ceasefire agreement with Hezbollah is approaching, and the IDF is showing some of the massive haul of weapons and ammunition it captured from Hezbollah positions, and this is including about 7,000 rocket launchers and an enormous numbers of rockets that was meant to be fired through Hezbollah against Israel. The haul of captured weapons also includes anti-aircraft missiles, surveillance equipment, mines, explosives, and thousands of assault rifles and pistols, along with millions of rounds of small arms ammunition. All of this was found in bunkers, warehouses, and tunnels that Hezbollah built right under the noses of the United Nations forces. They were supposed to prevent them from doing that, from rearming, and now there is a question about whether the Lebanese National Army will do a better job than the United Nations did in keeping Hezbollah away from the Israeli border. And speaking of borders, the IDF is preparing for a major military operation against Hamas, but not in Gaza, rather in Judea and Samaria, where dozens of Palestinian cities and villages have seen pro-Hamas demonstrations over the last 24 hours. But even as we continue to be vigilant and guard against the possibility of future attacks, we also stop to savor the small moments of joy that this day brought. As one Israeli official said, there wasn't a dry eye in the country yesterday as we saw the images of our 3 hostages returning to their families here in Israel. We will share some of that footage with you as Romy, Emily, and Doron were reunited with their families after 471 days in hell, capped off by the media circus that Hamas orchestrated around their release. Despite all of that, these 3 young women are no longer hostages. They reunited with their mothers, flew by helicopters to Sheba Hospital in Israel, and hugged their loved ones. Finally free. The world was also moved and horrified by Hamas's last humiliation. Finally, the head of the octopus, Iran, is finding itself paralyzed by a deep financial crisis at home and deepening social unrest as its long-suffering population appears to have had enough. Iran's electricity crisis is worsening, and Iranian industry is dealing with frequent power outages that have shut down factories and led to bottlenecks in distribution and delivery networks. This is happening even before the return of incoming US President Donald Trump and the maximum pressure campaign he threatened to bring against Iran. However, Iran still has some cards to play as it unveils an underground naval base and boasts that its forces are capable of sinking an American aircraft carrier. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what's happening in Israel on day 472 of the war with Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, and all the Shiite militias in Iraq, along with the terrorists and criminal gangs in Judea and Samaria, All of them are taking their orders from the Revolutionary Guards Corps in Iran, which is the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. A moment before we begin, I want to wholeheartedly wish success to the incoming United States President Donald Trump and to all the officials in his administration who will be sworn in this month. I'd also like to invite you to click the subscribe button if you haven't already, so that you stay tuned to the truth in real time and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. I want to tell you about our sponsor for today's video, Magen David Adom. They are Israel's emergency medical response team, and their entire budget comes from donations. I'll tell you more about them in a moment, but first, the news. Hamas presents the hostage deal as a dramatic victory over Israel, and indeed, crowds of Palestinians went out to celebrate the ceasefire that ended the fighting, which wreaked destruction across the Gaza Strip. But now that refugees are returning to their homes, they must confront the massive devastation, and many are expressing shock and deep frustration. Hamas runs on lies and deceit, the way that car runs on gasoline. And that includes the lies that it is telling the Palestinian people that they're stronger than ever and that they are closer than ever to destroying Israel and ejecting all the Jews from this country. But that's never going to happen, and there will never be a chance for peace in this part of the world until the Palestinians accept that. I have hope that they will begin to do so now, after this unprecedented disaster that Hamas has brought to them. To paraphrase the late United States President Ronald Reagan, the people of Gaza should ask themselves if they're better off than they were 15 months ago when Hamas started this war that they saw has ended in a great victory over Israel, according to what they're saying. Another question they might ask is, if this is what Hamas victory looks like, what would a defeat look like? It should be recalled that on Sunday, as part of the ceasefire that went into effect at 11:15 a.m., it was also delayed by 3 hours due to the delay in submitting the list of names of the hostages released last night by Hamas, Romi Gonen, Emily Damari, and Doron Steinbacher. The IDF began withdrawing from populated areas in the north and south of the Gaza Strip. In practice, it appears that the IDF has relinquished, as part of the withdrawal, the new partition route that was set up during the recent months of the operation in northern Gaza, around Jabalia, and masses of refugees were seen flooding into that area to check on their destroyed homes. Many of them did not even wait for the ceasefire to come into effect and began moving towards their ruined homes as early as the morning hours. Displaced people were seen carrying their belongings on bicycles or on carts drawn by donkeys, and many expressed concerns about their future in the ruined towns. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs announced that 436,000 structures, making up 92% of the homes in the Gaza Strip, were destroyed or damaged in the war. But you probably won't hear any statement from Hamas apologizing for the people of Gaza for all of this. For Hamas terrorists, the ceasefire was an opportunity to emerge from their hiding places armed, wearing clean uniforms for cameras, and showing everyone that they're still in charge in the Gaza Strip. Hamas police were spotted in several areas wearing blue uniforms, and the peak was reached with the release of the female hostages last night, when masses of Hamas's military wing militants, the El Qassam brigades, gathered in a square in central Gaza City in a deliberate spectacle for the cameras as the hostages Doron, Emily, and Romi were handed over to the Red Cross. The crowd gathered there, cheered the terrorists, and shouted Allahu Akbar as the cameras rolled. Candidly, I hope they enjoyed their moment, because as they say in Arabic, Kul kalb bijyom, every dog has its day, and every terrorist with a sense of victory and blood on their hands will pay the price for what they did to Israel. No one who attacks this country ever gets away with it. Usually, not in this world. and definitely not in the next one. With all of that having been said, upon the deal taking effect, Hamas announced it will intend to redeploy throughout the Gaza Strip, and based on its current behavior, it is likely that they will refuse to be removed from power as part of the negotiations expected to begin on day 16 of the first stage. And regarding the terms of the second stage, in which Hamas demands an end to the war and a full withdrawal of the IDF from Gaza in exchange for the release of the rest of the living hostages, we'll see what will happen. For its part, Israel has already clarified it will demand the removal of Hamas's leaders from Gaza and the dismantling of its regime, and Netanyahu declared that Israel would be able to return to fighting in new ways. Ibrahim Madhoun, an analyst close to Hamas who operates out of Turkey, says last night to the New York Times that Hamas's message in its show of force is that Hamas is the day after in Gaza. According to him, they want to say that Hamas must be part of any future arrangement, or at least there needs to be a coordination with Hamas. However, the incoming United States administration of Donald Trump has made it very clear that they are not interested in allowing Hamas to be in control of the Strip, and have high hopes that they will follow through on these statements. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on all developments regarding the Gaza Strip going forward. We ask you to help us by sharing these videos on YouTube, following us on social media, and subscribing to this YouTube channel. Throughout the last 15 months of war, Magen David Adom has been busy caring for the victims of rocket attacks and terrorism. But they have also been doing what they always do during peaceful times, like taking care of people who have heart attacks, pregnant women about to give birth, victims of car accidents, work accidents, and so on. Although we are deeply grateful for the lives they've saved, as we look ahead, we know they will continue to need our support moving forward. They use the medical supplies they buy almost as fast as they are delivered, and the task of training and preparing for future emergencies never ends. So please pray for Magen David Adom, and if you want to donate to them, you can do so at www.savelifeisrael.com. Now, we turn to another question about what the IDF will be doing during the ceasefire in Gaza. On Saturday evening, the Southern Command Chief, Major General Yaron Finkelman, declared 3 areas as closed military zones: the Nitzana area, the Kerem Shalom area, and the Erez Crossing. The goal is to assert full military control without destruction over any possible movement out of the Gaza Strip and into the Gaza Strip, be it humanitarian aid trucks, which will now increase significantly, or any possible scenario in which the IDF needs a quick entry or exit from Gaza. Regarding the Philadelphia route, after a weekend of disinformation, it can be said that the IDF will not withdraw from the Philadelphia route in the first stage of the deal, meaning in the next 42 days. And now, let's get into what is hiding in Stage B of the hostage deal. Stage B of the hostage deal remains vague and raises many questions after a 42-day military pause as part of Stage A. New negotiations will begin for the release of the remaining Israeli hostages, referred to as Stage B. According to reports, the principles of the second stage appear in a document called Appendix B, a document that remains secret and whose content is not disclosed to the public. According to political sources, Appendix B includes the principle of the negotiations to complete the deal and the conditions for the release of additional Palestinian prisoners in exchange. While Stage A did not include prisoners like Ibrahim Hamed or Abbas el-Sayed, who are considered highly dangerous and were convicted of very serious crimes, there is concerns they may be released in subsequent stages. In addition, Hamas has kept most of the male hostages, including the 4 soldiers, as a bargaining chip. And Israeli leaders emphasize that there is almost certainty the fighting will resume at the end of Stage A. However, doubts are being raised about the ability to return to northern Gaza and contend with the new conditions, which include a large population and destroyed infrastructure. There are also opinions suggesting that Hamas may use the ceasefire to strengthen its power and reposition itself strategically. Does Appendix B contain new commitments? What will Israel's position be in the end of Stage A? And will the fighting resume under more favorable conditions for Israel, or will Hamas succeed in establishing a significant advantage? We will only find out when the ceasefire ends. If we enter Stage B of this deal, that's already a different story and depends on the outcome of the negotiations set to begin on the 16th day of this deal. Then we'll be able to report on any changes and also say this: Israel retains the right to act as necessary to ensure our security, and this includes preventative actions to stop attacks on Israelis before they happened. If and when this occurs, TBN Israel will be there to report on it for you. So please, keep your attention on the truth, share our videos on YouTube, and follow us on social media, as we're working day and night to bring you the truth and what's important about what's happening in Israel. We need your support to continue, so please, every financial contribution helps us move forward. Click the donate button on YouTube or go to tbnisrael.com/give, because every dollar of yours will truly be invested in sharing the truth and in praying for the peace of Jerusalem. Now, switching our focus to Judea and Samaria, where hundreds of terrorists were released from Israeli prisons over the last 24 hours as part of the ceasefire deal. This led to displays of support for Hamas in Palestinian villages on Sunday evening. Street demonstrations included displays of armed men marching through the streets and speeches inciting violence against Israelis and also against the Palestinian Authority. But for the most part, these demonstrations passed without incident, and there was no need for the IDF to enter these areas to restore order. However, in the northeastern part of Samaria, conferences in support of Hamas were held, with dozens of armed terrorists participating. In Ramallah, the stronghold of the Palestinian Authority, hundreds shouted at the top of their voices, "The people want the El Qassam brigades," while nearby stood Palestinian Authority police officers, and in Jenin, armed men with uncovered faces distributed the sweets in broad daylight. Among the villages where processions took place, including frameworks and waving of Hamas flags, are the villages of Burka, Awadla, Beta, Inabus, and Kusra in Samaria, as well as the villages of Bitunia, Khirbet, Abu Falah, and Burka in Binyamin. These demonstrations continue for several hours, including in the areas near Ofer prison, from where the terrorists are being released. There is great concern in Israeli security circles that Judea and Samaria could be the next active front in this war. Iran is doing everything it can to smuggling weapons and ammunition, as well as money and ideology, to try and motivate young Palestinians to fight both Israel and the Palestinian Authority. It is notable that even Hamas has had trouble with some of the criminal gangs that Iran is arming and funding in the Palestinian cities, but Hamas is still the main beneficiary of all this activity. They are building up their forces in Judea and Samaria, just as they did in Gaza, preparing to try and wrest control away from the Palestinian Authority and attack Israel as well. Soon, the Islamic holy month of Ramadan will begin, which is traditionally a time when violence against Israelis increases. With that in mind, the release of hundreds of terrorists, especially young ones, back to their homes in Judea and Samaria and in East Jerusalem is certainly a cause for concern. The IDF understands this and is preparing. 2 companies were transferred on Saturday to Judea and Samaria, and it is possible that there will be a large-scale anti-terror operation in Judea and Samaria very soon. The IDF has already deployed the Commander Brigade to prepare for the mission and moved quality units like the Gaza reconnaissance units for that purpose. In the coming days, we will also see the Nachal Brigade and other units arriving in the area in order to prepare for whatever comes next. The question is whether this fighting might sabotage the ceasefire in Gaza. The assessment by the intelligence echelon is that it probably won't, as there is doubt about the capacity of Hamas in Gaza to react to events elsewhere beyond the usual threatening statements. But as I said earlier in the report, the frustrated residents of the Gaza Strip in their current situation are still guided by Hamas, and this makes it necessary for Israel to be very tough and not give Hamas the slightest reason to doubt our resolve. On Sunday morning, Hamas tried to test that resolve by taking their time in releasing the names of the hostages that were set to be released later that day and sending out armed fighters in Toyota pickup trucks into the open. They did this because they didn't believe Israel would strike these trucks after the ceasefire was supposed to go into effect, despite their own violation of the agreement. But the IDF wasted no time in destroying those trucks to show Hamas that this nonsense will not stand, and shortly thereafter, the promised list of names was indeed released. That is how you can deal with terrorists. Don't back down, not a little bit, because if you do, they'll come at you with everything they have to try and exploit what they see as a point of weakness. These demonstrations of resolve in one arena resonate in others, and that includes Judea and Samaria. Next week, TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani and I will be heading to the hot zone of Judea and Samaria to bring you boots on the ground reporting about the planned IDF operation there aimed at crushing the terrorist organizations trying to infiltrate into the still fragile fabric. You don't want to miss that report, so click in the subscribe button if you haven't already and never miss a single episode of Boots on the Ground. Now, we conclude with another look at last night's events in Israel when we welcome home some of our female hostages. News sites all over the world reported on the return of Doron Steinbecher, Emily Damari, and Romi Gonen in a live blog format, meaning live updates minute by minute, covering every development, big or small, just like in Israel. From their contact with the Red Cross to the first hug with their mothers and their arrival into the hospital. Upon their release from Hamas captivity after 471 days of hell in Gaza, it was revealed that Emily Damari and Romi Gonen were together in captivity. Doron Steinbacher was also released with them. Hamas provided the 3 hostages with a brown bag, inside of which were a map of Gaza, the Gaza Strip, photos of them, of the hostages from their days in captivity, and a release certificate of the Izzadin el-Qassam brigades. It was also notable that on the pink outfit that Doron Steinbecher wore, there were Palestinian flags. This gift bag, full of souvenirs from their time in captivity, shows the wicked depravity of Hamas, but I think it also shows us that these guys have some serious mental health issues, and that's a factor in all of this that we must always keep in mind. This is an evil spirit, and this is a spiritual war. In any case, after they received their goodie bags from Hamas, the hostages were put into a vehicle and driven, accompanied by armed terrorists, to the meeting point with the Red Cross. The Red Cross then took them the rest of the way to Israeli territory, where they were given an initial medical examination and then put on helicopters for a quick flight to Sheba Medical Center, where they were reunited with their families. But before that, Emily's mother waited for her, together with the mothers of Doron and Romi, already at the initial reception point that the IDF set up at the Re'im crossing, and met them minutes after they arrived inside the Israeli territory. Emily and her mother, Mendy, were photographed together, both smiling, in a snapshot from Emily's emotional video call with her friends. In another photo, she is seen raising her hand in a victory sign with 2 fingers missing and her hand bandaged. This is because the missing fingers were shot off her hand during the Hamas attack on September 7, 2023. Mandy emphasized in her remarks that the fight for the release of the hostages is not over, while Emily's nightmare in Gaza is over. For far too many families, the impossible wait continues. Every hostage must be freed until the very last one, and humanitarian aid must reach those hostages who are still waiting to come home. Doron Steinbacher's family expressed their joy over her release and stated, "After 471 unbearable, difficult days, our beloved Dodo has returned to our arms. We want to extend our heartfelt thanks to everyone who supported and accompanied us along this way. Special thanks to the people of Israel for the warm embrace, unwavering support, and strength you gave us in the hardest moments. We also thank President Trump for his involvement and support, which were extremely meaningful for us. Our hero, Dodo, who survived 471 days in Hamas's dungeons, begins her rehabilitation journey today. We will continue to stand by the families and do all we can until all their loved ones return home." At this moment, these heroes who survived the horror and terror deserve rest and peace. We will continue to pray for the rest of the female and male hostages held in the filthy hands of the Hamas terrorist organization in Gaza. Keep spreading the truth, share, and follow us. But most importantly, pray. Pray for the IDF soldiers wherever they are in Gaza, in Syria, in Lebanon, or in Judea and Samaria. They are defending us and defending the West from the rest of these terrorist organizations and this evil ideology. Pray for the peace of the people of Israel, and most importantly, don't forget to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Remember, this is a spiritual war, and how we fight a spiritual war? We pray. Prayer is a powerful tool, and we're going to win this war because God is on our side.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.